Last year, I just got sick and tired of paying so much for my cell phone bill, so I decided to do something about it. And now I only pay $15 per month for my cell phone service. In this video, I'm gonna talk about what I did and whether you should do the same. Hi everyone, welcome to another Tech Talk with Samir, where I talk about anything and everything related to technology in my life. Perhaps the most frequently used technology in my life is my cell phone, and I'm sure most of you can probably relate. It's the first piece of tech I use in the morning, and more often than not, it's the last piece of tech I use before I fall asleep at night. It's amazing how much cell phones have become an integral part of our lives over the last 2 decades. But that has come with a cost, like literally, from the high cost of the devices themselves, as well as the monthly costs for the service. It's not exactly cheap to own a cell phone. And if you've paid attention over the years, there's a good chance that you're paying higher for your cell phone bill today than you were maybe even 5 years ago. Yes, of course the services have improved, you get faster data speeds and more reliable coverage than you did 5 years ago, but at the end of the day, you're still paying more of your hard-earned dollars today than in the years past. I live in the United States, and here there's currently 3 major cell phone carriers: Verizon, at&t, and T-Mobile. In the past, I've lived in Canada, and over there it's a very similar situation where 3 major carriers dominate the market: Rogers, TELUS, and Bell. Whenever you have a situation where a very few number of service providers dominate an industry, you're not going to see as much competition between them to lure customers in. This usually results in a lack of innovation and also a lack of price incentives for customers. Here in the US, we see a similar situation even amongst internet providers. Now, when it comes to innovation, to give them credit, the cell phone providers have made many improvements over the years, including new technologies like 5G and continued expansion of coverage. But when it comes to pricing, there's been very little that each carrier has done to lure customers in from another carrier. A few years ago, T-Mobile actually tried it very aggressively with their Un-Carrier initiative, and that did lead to some competition, and the other carriers had to do some things to become more competitive. But over time, things have evened out again, and there hasn't been much in the way of helping the customers in terms of costs. Up until last year, I was actually with T-Mobile. In my family, I have 5 lines and I was paying roughly $150 per month. To be honest, amongst the big 3 carriers, that's as good of a price as you're gonna get, so I was generally okay with paying that. I mean, it averaged out to be roughly $30 per line. But when I annualized the costs and realized that I was paying $1,800 a year for the 5 lines, that's when it became a little harder to swallow. Just like most people in America, I just became accustomed to these high costs and just accepted it. But last year, I started seeing billboards here in Texas for Mint Mobile. They claim to have premium wireless for only 15 bucks. I've always just dismissed it as some sort of subpar cell phone service where prices start at $15. I assumed when you add data and texting, it's probably just gonna add up to the same cost as the major carriers. I never really bothered looking into it. Until one day when I was talking to my brother-in-law, he mentioned that he was using Mint Mobile on his phone. That's when I decided to look into it. My main requirement was to have a comparable plan and network coverage to what I already had with T-Mobile. As I was doing my research, I found out a few things. The $15 plan that they advertise is actually almost identical to what I had with T-Mobile. Unlimited talk, text, along with 4 gigs of data. And the other thing that I found out was that Mint Mobile actually doesn't have their own towers. They actually piggyback off of T-Mobile's towers. As a result, their coverage area is identical to T-Mobile. So why would T-Mobile even allow that? I mean, if I spent billions of dollars building out towers and other infrastructure, I wouldn't just let someone else undercut my pricing and provide the same service. Turns out there's a term for this. It's called Mobile Virtual Network Operator, or MVNO for short. Without getting into the details of how it works, it's basically T-Mobile selling the capacity of their infrastructure to another company, but that company would have to do their own pricing structure for their own customers, along with all the administrative things that go along with that. That being said, if there was ever a situation where T-Mobile's infrastructure became overloaded, they would prioritize their own customers and throttle the MVNO customers, which I think is fair. So going back to my experience, I decided to give Mint Mobile a shot. I signed up online for a 3-month trial for $15 per line, and within a couple of days I received my SIM cards and some instructions to get started. You can actually physically go and buy the service in person in stores like Target if you wanted to. The process of setting up was actually very easy. I even managed to port my numbers from T-Mobile. To port numbers, you do need to have your previous carrier's account number as well as the passcode for the account. And as you port your number, it will auto-cancel your service with your old provider. One thing you should check with your old carrier is whether you have any early term termination fees. The last thing you want is a surprise bill from your old carrier in the process of trying to save some money. Once I was ported over, that was pretty much it. For my day-to-day use, nothing had changed. I was able to use my phone just like I was doing previously with T-Mobile. And just like T-Mobile, if I ever used up my 4 gigs of data, it just proceeded to throttle my service rather than send me a huge bill. The plan includes unlimited calling to Canada and Mexico just like my old T-Mobile plan. So it really was a seamless transition for me. So let's talk costs. So when I signed up for my first 3 months, I used a referral link from my brother-in-law. That gave me a $15 credit for each line for my next renewal. So when it came to renewing, I renewed it for 1 year and I paid a total of $935 for 5 lines for a whole year's service. That's almost half of what I was paying annually with T-Mobile. Even if I take away the referral credit I got from my brother-in-law, it would still be under $17 per month per line even after taxes. That's just insane. So what's the catch? There's gotta be a catch, right? Well, there is a few, and depending on your circumstances, they may be very minor or they might be deal breakers. But before I go through the caveats, I just want to remind you to hit the thumbs up button for this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is a very small channel and your support goes a long way to helping the channel grow. When it comes to a carrier like Mint Mobile, the biggest hurdle for some people may be the fact that it's actually a prepaid service. What that means is that if you sign up for 1 year's service, you have to pay the entire year's cost up front. Although over the long run you're paying much less, coming up with a year's worth of cell phone costs may be difficult for some people. You can go with 3 or 6 months of service rather than 12 months, but the per line costs are higher for those lower terms than the 12-month service. So you have to make the decision whether you want to pay less upfront but pay more in the long run, or pay more upfront and pay less in the long run. I personally think that if you can, always go for whatever costs less in the long run. Another hurdle for some people may be the phones themselves. With Mint Mobile, you actually have to provide your own phone. With the major carriers, they usually have promos where if you sign up for a 2-year term, you get either a free phone or a discount phone or some sort of financing on phones. But with Mint Mobile, you have to provide your own phone that's unlocked and can be used with carriers like Mint Mobile. Now, keep in mind that when the big carriers give you those discounted phones, they're not really discounted. You're paying for it one way or another. They just market it in a way where you feel like you're getting a deal. Just like the prepaid caveat, this is another situation where you'll have to spend some money up front to buy the phones if you don't have any existing unlocked phones. For me, all my family members were already using unlocked iPhones, so we were able to use our existing phones when we switched over. Another caveat is that if you need to check your call logs, there's no way to do that. You can't log into a website to check call history, so if that's something you need for whatever reason, you won't be able to do that with Mint Mobile. One thing I briefly touched on earlier is that if T-Mobile's towers are ever overloaded, they will prioritize their own customers and throttle the speeds of MVNO carriers like Mint Mobile. Although it's rare, I have seen situations where my Mint Mobile phone is getting slower data speeds than my work phone, which is on T-Mobile. But that being said, it's not something that I would have noticed from just using the phone. I only noticed it because I ran speed tests to compare. And generally from my day-to-day use, subjectively, I don't notice any difference. Also, if you're someone who frequently travels abroad, Mint Mobile isn't exactly ideal for that as roaming costs are relatively expensive. The major carriers on the other hand has great roaming buckets that you can add for your international trips. So is it all worth it? Should you go and switch your service to Mint Mobile? Well, I think it depends on your situation. If you're currently using unlocked phones and don't mind paying for a year's worth of service up front, then to be honest, I think it's a no-brainer. Yes, there might be little sacrifices here and there, but I personally think that those are very minor when compared to the savings. Now, if money is no object, then of course it's always best to go with the 3 main carriers to ensure that you get the absolute best service, speeds, and support. But I think for most people, switching to a MVNO carrier might be worth exploring. I'll be leaving my Mint Mobile referral link in the description of this video. If you choose to go with the link, both you and I will get a $15 credit towards the next renewal. But Mint Mobile isn't the only MVNO carrier out there. There's many of them out there like Metro, Visible, US Mobile, Boost Mobile. They all follow a similar business model of using one of the big carriers' network infrastructure to provide affordable pricing. I personally only use Mint Mobile, but I'm sure they will all have their own perks. By the way, if you're outside the US, chances are that your country also has MVNO carriers. Like in Canada, companies like Fido, Koodo, Public Mobile are all MVNO carriers. They use the infrastructure set up by Rogers, Bell, and Telus. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this video and hopefully you picked up a few tips on how to save a few bucks. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already. As always, stay safe and I'll see you again on the next one.